Stretching back over 3.5 billion years, life on Earth has endured times of crippling hardship and undying prosperity. As the relentless machine of evolution presses forward, new species thrive and old ones perish, always at the mercy of nature. But when and where did humans emerge? How does our story, the human story, begin? Primates had been rapidly diversifying since the fifth great extinction event around 65 million years ago, which drove the dinosaurs to extinction. But it was only around 8.8 million years ago that the tribe Hominini, from which all species of human are descended, evolved into a distinct group. By 6.3 million years ago, the genus Pan had split from our own ancestors. These early forebears, however, still had a long way to go. Their brain size was only around 350 cubic centimeters, in comparison to the 1,350 of modern humans, and they still primarily lived in trees. Nonetheless, evolution took its hold, and roughly 4.2 million years ago, a new species, Australopithecus anamensis, had evolved. These new hominins were much more accustomed to walking over land, aided by a stronger knee bone, though still capable of living in forest canopies. Benefiting from both environments, Australopithecus anamensis became remarkably successful and gave rise to the later Australopithecus afarensis. As their cranial capacity increased, so too did their ingenuity. From 3.3 million years ago, Australopithecus afarensis began to shape rocks into tools. As the first known use of technology, this hails the beginning of the lower Paleolithic era of technology. These tools made scavenging for meat a more viable food source, which in turn began a rapid acceleration in brain development. From here, new species emerged with a widening variety of traits and intelligence. Paranthropus boisei and robustus, belonging to a new tribe, became acutely adapted to a herbivorous ground-based lifestyle. The size of both their brains was now well in excess of 500 cubic centimeters. Another contemporaneous species, Australopithecus rudolfensis, was capable of walking significantly longer distances due to the changing curvature in their spines. But what was arguably the biggest change during this period was the emergence of Homo habilis around 2.4 million years ago. As the first true humans, their brains exhibited an unprecedented size of 650 cubic centimeters, and may even have been capable of elementary speech. These adaptations proved essential. A new period of global cooling had driven all the remaining hominini to extinction, with the exception of the thriving Homo habilis and their now distant cousins in the Pan tribe, the chimpanzees. By 1.8 million years ago, they had evolved into Homo ergaster. Humans were now showing a greater awareness of their environment, and were able to use footprints to track animals. Their increased ability to walk over long distances precipitated their spread out of Africa and across Asia, as far as modern China. By the time of Homo erectus, about 1.1 million years ago, humanity had spread right through Europe, and brain capacity was approaching 1,000 cubic centimeters. Yet, even this wasn't a match for the 1,200 cubic centimeters of Homo heidelbergensis from around 500,000 years ago. Sometimes known as archaic humans, they developed a rudimentary understanding of how to create and control fire. This demonstrates a greater ability of the species to learn and retain information over many generations, and implies the existence of a more complex language. It is likely, therefore, that humans were able to visualize abstract concepts in order to explain their environment to others. Wooden spears were invented sometime around 400,000 years ago, and became a staple of a new species of human, the Homo neanderthalis. They were very heavily built and perfectly adapted to surviving the cold climates of Europe. They also had the largest brains of any known human, around 1,450 cubic centimeters. This is even larger than ours today. Heidelbergensis was finally driven to extinction shortly after the evolution of Homo sapiens, 200,000 years ago. This event coincided with a new method of tool manufacture, known as the prepared core technique. It involved planning how a tool would look before being made, making them more useful for particular jobs. This made stone-tipped spears a reality, which in turn made hunting larger animals easier. The prepared core technique finally marks the end of the lower Paleolithic era and brings humanity into the middle Paleolithic. Erectus shared the same fate as Heidelbergensis and probably went extinct around 140,000 years ago. Tools were becoming so advanced that from 50,000 years ago, their uses can today be specifically identified. This marks the transition to the Upper Paleolithic era. This era sees the rise of a cultural sophistication of humanity, as the dead were now buried and people appear to attach great importance to objects of no practical use, such as beads. Although Neanderthals also benefited from these recent advances, a culmination of climate change, competition with Homo sapiens, and a weaker social structure caused their extinction between 40 and 30,000 years ago. Homo sapiens from this point were the last intelligent hominin and set about colonizing the entire planet. They had crossed the Bering Strait into North America by 18,000 years ago and reached Argentina by 12,000 years ago. Further inventions such as microliths and bows brought an end to the Paleolithic era altogether and initiated the Mesolithic era. Humans now inhabited almost every corner of the globe with ever-growing technological competence. And all this from a once minor species that boldly ventured out of Africa.